Good evening, and you're very welcome to another Women's National League podcast here as our audio goes crazy. Pressing the wrong buttons here, good up. But we are back for episode 14 of the podcast. It is, of course, the League of Ireland Women's podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. I'm Breifne and Aaron, and with me, as always, Aaron Clark. Aaron, you're very welcome back. It's been an interesting week on the field. Plenty to talk about today. Late replacements in competitions. We've got a big Ireland squad announcement tomorrow. We've had sellouts at international games. It's been a phenomenal week for the game in the country. How have you been?
Yeah, been all right. Missed the games the weekend, unfortunately, a bit under the weather, but caught up on some of them. The thing you haven't even mentioned, Breifne, is the fact that they've also, the FAI announcing their new plans for stadiums and things like that as well. Great to see the women really part of the forefront as well and things like that, because it's been really positive, as you say. Everything the last couple of weeks has been massively positive. Today's announcement is another right step in the right direction. And, you know, things are good at the minute. Things are good with women's football. They're on the rise. FIFA also announcing the prize money going up as well for the Women's World Cup and things like that. So everything is always taking a step in the good directions.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read the infrastructure plan in any great detail at all. Somebody sent me a screenshot of it this morning. The first thing I saw was a typo, and it was a horrific typo. And I just thought, oh, I'm going to need a day or two to get around to reading that. And I just thought, no, this is something that needs a bit more attention than I have today to give to it. But we will probably talk about that at length on next week's show. There was, of course, as well, a small matter of the FAI Cup draw. 14 teams in the hat for round one. Shells, of course, will join the 7 winners to make up the quarterfinals. Those games not down for decision, I think, for another, I want to say 10 weeks. It's near the end of
August. 9th of August.
Yeah, so it's 10 or 11 weeks before those games will take place. So much happening between now and then that it's almost an aside at this stage. But I suppose the big news is the warm-up games for the World Cup selling out in Tallaght Stadium, 8,000, whatever it is, ish tickets for both games. Like, I don't know if you remember back to the I won't say the dark days in UCD in Belfield Park and Richmond Park, when you knew everybody who was at every single game back in those days, and it was kind of like friends meeting up, hadn't seen each other in a few weeks since the last game. It's a very different kettle of fish now. This World Cup has really pushed the game into a whole new stratosphere.
Breifne, I'll give you an example that I'll always remember is the women even playing a game in the middle of a men's game at halftime, and the men's international Ireland against an Arsenal select, and then they play the game the next day. Like, things like that. How far we've come from things like that. Like, even if you think back to the protest 5 years ago, you look at the crowd that was in Tallaght Stadium the following Thursday when they played Slovakia. Minimal. You look at, there's been times where you've gone to games, there's barely any people there for an international game. The press box is empty, things like that. And just look at how far everything has come along. Everybody wants to be involved. Everybody wants to hop on the train. Like, for me, I wasn't surprised to see these games selling out. To be honest with you, I thought when I seen them go on sale, okay, I thought the Zambia game would be a little bit more difficult. But I've been sort of keeping a little bit of an eye on tickets and stuff like that over the last while. And even when the French one, like, I warned everybody, I gave everybody the pre-sale link to both games the day before they went on public sale. And I warned them, I was like, this is going to happen. They're going to go. And, like, you're looking at the French game in particular, like, even on the first day of general sale, the numbers were quite low, what was left. So it was always going to be a case of a matter of if not when. And even, like, last week when the FAI announced the French game was sold out, I went on to Ticketmaster and had a nosy on the Zambia game. Rather than just search the amount of tickets I wanted, I went in through the map. And you were looking, it was like a lot of the times there was a couple of 2 seats together, then it was 1 seat dotted all over the place. That I think it was less than 100 left at that stage. And, like, the fact that the Zambia game is a couple of weeks away and the demand is there, the only thing is, and I'm playing a little bit of a, not necessarily devil's advocate here, I'm playing a little bit of the thing here. I just hope everybody who bought a ticket shows up. You know, we've seen that before where they've announced sellouts and then all of a sudden there's loads of tickets still available. Thankfully, they've done away with the men's season ticket holders being automatically guaranteed a ticket now, whereas they brought out their own women's season ticket, which is great. Like, listen, the thing is, they've also upped the prices as well. The price of 20 quid each for each game, or 90 quid for the season ticket. And for me, we talked about the women's game at the start of the year about how you had to start charging a better value. And, like, when we see National League teams going to €10 entry, it was always to be expected that the Ireland games would go up, but I think €20 still represents a good value. The family tickets, when the other North stand opens as well, that'll bring it up to 10,000. And like we still haven't really touched on the fact that they're going to play Northern Ireland in September in the Avenir Stadium as well, and at the start of the Nations League. Like, there's so much of a buzz around the team, and it's great to see that these two games are going to be sold out. Like the biggest thing, the French game is 2 days, is the day before they start to travel to Australia, so it's the last opportunity for people to see them, and it's good for the girls. I think they deserve it. You're right, there's a massive buzz around because we qualify for the World Cup now.
I remember those games I talked about. I think I had visions of playing Italy and Switzerland and big countries, but just nobody at the games, and being given literally a week or two beforehand dozens, and I mean dozens of books of tickets to give out to people for free just to get bodies in the gate, and we couldn't do it. It's so great to see the distance that the sport has come in that last probably 18 to 20 years. So it's really, really class. I will say to people listening, if you're listening to us live, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions that you want us to answer in relation to the FAI Cup draw, any of the games last weekend or what's coming up this weekend, as well as the international draw, who do you think should be in the Ireland squad? Drop a comment wherever you're watching this on social media, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. We can bring it up on screen. I'll show you an example of what it looked like. We can bring it up here and pose your questions, and then we can try and answer them if we can at all. So feel free to do that throughout the show. We'd love to hear from you. Let's move straight on to last weekend's results and get that out of the way before we get really stuck into maybe some discussion on the World Cup squad itself. Some big games last weekend, plenty of I suppose, good performances, an absolute thriller of a game down in Treaty United. Emma Doherty, an inspired performance from her, dragged Sligo Rovers to a share of the spoils, 3-3 down there, 2 goals and an assist for her. Peamount United 5-3, a hat-trick for Kate Mooney. She won't get as many easy as the third one, but 2 fabulous scores, a great strike from Chloe Maloney. I'm not going to say anything, but we did have her on the podcast last week. This good luck charm is definitely going on and on and on, but also plenty of fantastic strikes and performances across the grounds as well. Dealor got an important win for them and picks up their season a bit down in Cork. A bit fortuitous in terms of maybe lax defending from Cork, but Kate Malone stuck the ball in the back of the net very comfortably from that long-range Jess Gleeson effort. Scoreless in Shamrock Rovers and Bohemians in Dalymount. Bows be quite happy with that performance, while champion Shells kept some pressure on the top of the table with a 2-0 win down in Galway. Your thoughts on the games and how it all went, in your opinion, Aaron?
Before I do, because you said to me before the show you're going to put me on the spot, so I'm going to put you on the spot right here.
Okay.
There's been 3 players this season have made the team of the week 5 times.
Okay.
Any idea who they are? I
do, because I saw it on Twitter during the week. So I'd be lying if I said I didn't. As far as
I got the trade, but
Karen Duggan and Sive Doyle. So I did see you reply on Twitter during the week. So I get the answer right, but it's by default. So you answered it. I wouldn't have got. I probably would have got Karen Duggan. I might not necessarily have got Sive Doyle for every single week, but no.
The only one I would have thought that potentially could have been in and around there was Jenna Slattery, because Jenna's obviously being very good, and it's interesting that. Like Bows, you talk about the results from the weekend. Bows have now completed the clean sweep of actually taking points off every team in the National League. They were just awaiting Shamrock Rovers, and it's a big difference from when they played 5 or 6 weeks ago, and Shamrock Rovers battered them out of the gate in Tallaght Stadium, beat them 4-0. You look at the defending on that day from Bows, and they probably won't want to watch it back. And it was a better performance from them. Again, Breifne, I'm going to say this, and I'm sort of biting my lips saying this a little bit. A power cut this week cost LOITV to miss the first 60-odd minutes. I'm just getting frustrated. I understand things like this happen where sometimes it's out of control, but it's too many weeks.
They happen, but it's been 3 consecutive weeks where we've lost at least one game, or the vast majority of at least one game. It's not good.
Don't forget, we've had interruptions in DLR as well.
Well, we've had interruptions all over the shop a couple of times. There was one game I watched. I think that actually might have been a men's game, to be fair. But from the start of I didn't turn it off or slow it or move around. It was 12 minutes behind by the time it got to the end. When the 90-minute notification came through on my phone, I was looking at the game and it was 78 minutes on screen. And when I tried to refresh it, it was still coming up 78 minutes, and it was a poor production. Some of the clubs, some of the time, are having serious problems with their productions. Most of the time are brilliant, but there's just a few of them. I'm not going to get drawn into commentary. I think there's a whole level of commentary needed that isn't there at a number of clubs. Not all of them, definitely not all of them, and probably not even the majority. Some of the commentators are phenomenally good. But some of the clubs, I think, need to have a real think about the quality of the production and the commentary combination that's going out. It's just not good enough when you're providing a paid for service. I appreciate a lot of people are voluntary, but it's not a free service. Therefore, you have to offer quality when you're charging for it, in my opinion. Is that fair?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And I think for me, that these pixel lock cameras are just absolutely doing my head in, because the fact that they're so easy to have problems with as well. But in terms of the production side of things, you are right. There's some ground as well, and you see it in the men as well as the women, where the sun shines, and all of a sudden that can ruin the game when the sun is shining, because where the camera placement, the sun doesn't help it either. And for a value for money, we need to make sure that we're having the right value at. Just in terms of, we're talking about cameras, productions and stuff like that, it's been interesting being around the National League this year. I don't know if you're aware, but I think RTE are doing an Irish documentary on the league, because I think it's nearly certain it is RTE. There's always a camera crew at a lot of the games where you'd see them going around with the big fancy cameras on the strapped to their backs and all, and the big microphones. And it's great to see things like that where they're following clubs throughout the season, and the clubs are getting more and more, will get more and more exposure. I suppose it's come out in and around Christmas time, but like, you see that then there's the rumored about the Ross Whittaker documentary as well on the Irish women's team for the World Cup. Like, there's a lot of great exposure things going on, and I think if we want to really capitalize on it, we just need to have the proper value for money in terms of the production of the LOI TV, because don't get me wrong, it's an absolutely brilliant service to have the opportunity, especially when you can't get to a game. But we just need to make sure we do have the correct value add. I think maybe now it might be a good idea just to stick with what's on the pitch. We've had a bit of a rant over.
Let's move on to the game. Thankfully, that power cut didn't affect our ability to see every goal in the league last weekend, because there were no goals in Dalymount to miss. I look back at the highlights. It's a pretty short clip. It shows the kickoff, the final whistle, and there's one play where Rachel Kelly makes a fairly routine save. It can't have been the best of games to be at in terms of, or maybe the highlights, which are another bugbear we're not going to get into now. Maybe the highlights just doesn't reflect how good a game it might have been.
Like, I know Bows, from speaking to the Bows camp, they done an awful lot of defending in the game. They had to do an awful lot of defending, but the thing is, they were expected to do that. They were expected to have to do that against the likes of Shamrock Rovers. But the fact that they didn't wilt when Rovers put the pressure on, I think Collie O'Neill will be a little bit disappointed with the fact that it's a big 2 points drop coming into what they have this weekend. They would have wanted to really keep the pressure up on Peamount, because a Peamount win this weekend really opens the gap. Then you're looking at from a Peamount point of view, the only real massive team that they've got, well, you would say that, but they're not on form at the minute, is Wexford Youth out of the so-called big teams left. So, like, it's from Collie O'Neill's point of view, it's probably a massive 2 points drop. Sean Byrne and Pat Trahey be absolutely delighted with the point, and the fact that they made amends for what happened in Tallaght was a great thing. One thing we haven't even mentioned about this game, Breifne, is the new League of Ireland Women's Premier Division attendance record as well was set at this game. It's great to see that the two sets of fans, considering there seem to be a lot of rivalries in the men's side of things, can come and watch a game together, and things can be smooth sailing as well. And it's great to see a new attendance record for the league.
I'm not going to lie, I saw some photos from the game, and I was very jealous of some of the people standing up on the shopping centre end there, and the kind of the area they're not supposed to be in. But it got me very nostalgic for a couple of nights there in the early noughties, just before they closed the Connacht Street side. Watching some of the European games, I think I saw Bows beat Bate Borisov, who've obviously gone on to bigger and better things in the last 20 years. But some great nights on that side of the ground. So lovely to see it, even though it's kind of few and far between, and probably just a little bit down to maybe a lack of extra stewarding on the night that gave people access to that. But it was definitely a little bit nostalgic. But on the field, you're dead right, Rovers would be disappointed to have dropped 2 points in that game. But for Bows, they stay in third place. It's a big result for them. Shells, 2 winners in Cork.
You mean fourth place? You mean fourth place rather than third?
Apologies, our league table must have an error in it. So yeah, but in terms of Shells, they'll be happy with that result, because Galway are proven to be very tricky to beat this season.
up until the last couple of weeks they have been, and all of a sudden they play 3 Dublin teams in the last 3 weeks, Galway, and they've come away with nothing. It's it's one of these that Phil Trill will be sort of scratching his head trying to see what's going on, because you look where the way they've been in the first 6, 7, 8 games, and then all of a sudden come up to Peamount, lose against Peamount, lose away to Rovers, then lose at home to Shells, and you're sort of thinking, oh no, where's things sort of gone wrong, and it's difficult for them because it's 3 tough games, and like on paper you probably say they're expected to lose all 3 games. Losing 2-0 to the Shells probably be the most disappointing. That the fact they didn't even get on the score sheet, but from a Shells point of view, like Gemma Quinn up top has been brilliant the last month or so. Megan Smith Lynch is always dangerous in and around the edge of that box, and Shells was an important win. Good for them to keep a clean sheet, having lost the Peamount the week previously, and like for Shells are now sort of relying on other teams to drop points, but they just need to keep winning at the minute.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Big game down in Treaty, Markets Field, Treaty United and Sligo, and I think there's no world in which Sligo should have taken a result out of this based on how well Treaty played in the first half and how, just to be honest, out of it Sligo were. They just didn't look like they've shown up. But yet Emma Doherty, she has done it time and time again. She just pulled it out of the bag. Fantastic performance for her. Set up 1 goal brilliantly and scored 2 other crackers as well, really to draw them back into the game and earn them a well-justified point in the end.
Like you look at Emma though. Everybody's been raving about Emma for years, considering what she was doing at underage Ireland stuff. Last year we sort of seen a sprinkle of her getting into the team of the year, having some very good performances. This year hasn't been as easy for her, but when you sort of give her too much time and opportunity, she is going to punish teams. And I think from a Treaty United point of view, they'd probably be extremely disappointed the fact that they let Sligo back into that game. When they're 3-1 up, they shouldn't be letting Sligo back into it at all, and they should be seeing that game out. And whereas for them, it's probably going to look upon as 2 points definitely dropped. Whereas from a Sligo point of view, they'd be happy just to pull that back and get that point. And Alvin Heisen probably like Phil Trill will be scratching his head to see what's going on, having had the big loss to Athlone recently as well, and then letting the 2-goal lead slip. And you're sort of wondering in that sense, where's it gone wrong? And like for both of these sides, you'd wonder, is the break coming maybe at the right time from a Treaty and a Galway point of view? Is the break coming at the right time? Sligo will have to probably try and strengthen during the window, but the problem is with the way the league is at the minute is who do you get in? That's the problem. There's not an awful lot of player unless you're going to go and try and nabble someone who's maybe playing in the underage leagues and bring them up, because there's not a lot of players who will probably be willing to move clubs during the off season unless they're not playing.
I think we possibly need to look at the Northern League, but now with Sion Swifts coming into the Avenir Sports Cup, we'll talk about that in a moment as well. That will be a traditional hunting ground in the Northwest. Themselves, Derry City, Gemma McGuinness would have come from that route. They would have had a few other players who have come down from those 2 teams and others dotted around the Northwest, up in the Donegal and in the Sean Leagues and in the Northern Ireland League. But that's a fairly small pool as well in terms of the number of players who are going to come in who are actively going to make a difference and improve Sligo Rovers. There's probably not that many names out there for them to go chase.
No, unless they're going to nabble someone who's maybe sitting on the bench for the likes of Athlone or sitting on the bench for Galway, who they think can add a value to their team. Other than that, there's not really many names that would stand out just straight away. Like the Brady sisters aren't really playing much in Galway. I know one of them has signed to go, has re-signed with Galway this season. Like if they could get people like that to potentially make that move, but then again, you're sort of looking like what you're going to have something to interest in players to want to move to Sligo, because it is quite a commute. It's quite a commute as well, and unless you're in that sort of commute or region, it's even harder to try and attract the players over there. So maybe Casey Howe has to use a bit of her connections and try and get one or two from the north. But
even Casey played in Belfast, but she's from Enniskillen, which is just across the border, just down the road from Sligo. So it's not that big a commute for her if she's based at home. Whereas a girl coming from even Derry or Belfast or anywhere around Northern Ireland, it's just that distance is huge.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Sion Swifts coming into the Avenir Cup, that could be an opportunity for Steve Feeney to maybe have a look at one or two players and see can he try and nabble them over the transfer window. But the only problem is that I'll need to check this out, but I'm nearly certain the transfer window only opens normally it only opens for the month of July.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then they're going to have to potentially look at bringing them in just after that cup, and you haven't really got a long time, especially if club players are playing with clubs in that stage. Like the other interesting one this year is the fact with the league going professional that the players actually can't come back from America and play in the league. You probably noticed we haven't seen any of them come in during the season. So because they're amateurs can't sign in a professional league unless the window is open. Only a free agent professional can sign in the league. So it's a bit of a catch-22 this year because there was a lot of talk would Bambi come back into one of the either Shells or Bowls, but obviously hasn't been able to, and that sort of negates maybe Cork might have tried to bring in one or two for a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, so that's going to be a big challenge. They might get a couple of games in July and maybe a few weeks in August out of them, but realistically, they're not going to play a whole lot of football this year. I don't think that's the worst thing for the league going forward, but we shall see. Other games that played over the weekend, of course, DLR, they won down in Cork, and that big result in Peamount on that loan, 2 challengers for the title last year. Peamount very much in the hunt this year. They lead the field. They'll be happy with that performance, particularly for Kate Mooney. She's really been on form this year. She's moved to the top of the goal scorers charts in her own right now. She was there in a joint capacity, but now she's there on her own. She's going to be happy, and the team have got to be happy with how this season's panning out for them.
Breifne, the biggest thing for me from this game is the fact they scored 4 goals in like 12 minutes. That was the sign of a ruthless. Can't even get them. Oh no, I'm gonna try and pronounce
Ruthless.
They were just ruthless. They were just absolutely ruthless, and that's the sort of thing that you're looking from a Peamount. That's like a Peamount of old from a couple of years ago, where they just go bum 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 and hit a couple. It's as if James O'Callaghan's just got that little bit of mindset into them. I think the Shells win was very big for them the week before, and like they realistically put that game to bed within 10 minutes and in the second half, and that spell in the second half, and then yes, that Clown scored a couple of late goals, but it probably just took a little bit of a gloss off it. But I was really impressed with the fact of the way Peamount went about that in that short period of time. And as you say, Kate Mooney, I feel for Kate over the last couple of years. She's had the ACL, she's had the couple of niggles, and when she was at Shell, she probably wasn't really looked upon as the top striker. She was sort of in and out an awful lot, and she was, how would you say, not really getting much of a run. And then she went to DLR, gets injured after does her ACL after scoring her first goal for DLR on the opening day of the season, and then you're sort of thinking, oh no. But her character, and then she come back last year. But I think this year with Peamount, she's really set the bar for herself this year, and you can see how much she's enjoying her football, and she's really working hard, and a lot of credit has to go to her, because the easy option when things haven't been working is to sort of drift away and just be happy to score a goal here or there. But she's not. You can see when she gets in a good team how important she is with them. But I think the characteristic of the Peamount team this year, it's all built a lot on hard work. They haven't necessarily got all the most skillful footballers in the world. Like, I know we've talked about Chloe Maloney a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but Chloe's not the most skillful footballer in the world, but she's one of the most hard-working you'll get. Like Jenna Barrow.
Is that not a benefit though? Because I think
100%.
maybe Peamount and a couple of teams, and it's not a new phenomenon in the women's game, but where 3 or 4 players can dominate a dressing room or a pitch, and they can be the spine of a team, and they kind of everything goes through them, and the other players are kind of just filling jerseys, and I don't mean that as an insult to them, but they're just not at the same level. Whereas Peamount have lost a couple of those girls that the outsiders would have all expected to be the main players on the field. So the experience of Anya O'Gorman, Stephanie Roach, and others have left the club in the last 6 months. But the other girls seem to have gelled really well. And now they have an 11, Karen Duggan aside, and maybe Neve Burke aside in terms of reputation and experience. But that gel, and they're a solid 11, which I can't remember a women's team, even the Shells sides that won the league for the last 2 years, being that 1 to 11 with the same level of quality more or less throughout the entire 15 or 16 girls in the frame.
But he's bringing in kids. He's bringing in the likes of Jess Fitzgerald, Ellen Doolan. Kids are getting an opportunity as well, and they're just stepping up because they see the mindset, the mentality. You're right in what you're saying. Sometimes that helps the team massively, whereas you look at last year, yes, they were probably over-reliant on the likes of Anya. They were over-reliant at times on Steph, over-reliant on Alana McAvoy, where this year they don't necessarily have the quality, but they've got the hard work and they're even more driven. And I think like you look at some of the games last year or this year, the Wexford game in Piedmont, even the likes of the Shells game, they may have lost them sort of games previous seasons because when it hits the fan, they sort of, things get tough. They tended to sometimes, I don't mean to sound bad here, but they tended to wilt or they tended to drop off a little bit. Whereas this year they're a much fitter side as well, and they're driving right until the very end, and they're pushing and pushing and pushing for winners. And I think there's a lot of players. It's probably fair to say there's a lot of players in that team this year, as you say, Karen Duggan aside, Niamh Burke aside, they have a lot to prove.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing.
We have a comment in here, as you can see on screen there, from someone that you may recognise the name of, Billy Cleary, former WNL manager, of course, with Galway WFC. A team is made up of artists and warriors. He's not wrong. You need those couple of special players in there with the girls who just put that effort in. But thanks for that, Billy. You're absolutely smack dab on the money. Let's take a quick look at the league table at the end of.
Just before we do, a quick word though on with DLR Cork. It was a good result for Laura Heffernan. It's 4 points from our opening two games from Danny Murphy. Probably be a little bit disappointed with the result to lose 1-0. It was a good atmosphere in Turner's Cross as well, and to come away on the wrong side of a 1-0 defeat is never nice. And for a Cork City point of view, things are still quite tough at the minute. And there was the sort of game where a little bit more experience, they might have got over the line, maybe got a point or got all 3 points. But from a DLOS point of view, the fact that Laura's taken up 4 points in her first two games, starting to build a little bit of momentum for her side, and another really, really important game from this weekend where she could potentially build a little bit more momentum and head into that Avenir Cup on a good pathway.
Absolutely. The league table, as I mentioned, Piedmont clear at the top, 3 points to spare over this week's opponents, Shamrock Rovers. Will they have 3 points or 6 points potentially at the end of the weekend? Shamrock Rovers will be hoping that they will be level pegging at the top of the table. Shells 3 points further back on 25 points, with Bohemians just those 2 points back. There's a bit of a group then, Galway, Wexford and Athlone, all within a 3 point gap, 16 to 19 points there, while DLR Waves picked up that win in Turner's Cross. They're back on 12. Treaty and Sligo kept consistent 3-all draw with them this week, leaves them 3 points between them. Sligo, of course, with that game in hand, while Cork City at the moment propping up the bottom of the table. If we scroll down, we can take a quick look at the statistics in terms of the top scorers in the division. I mentioned Kate Mooney. She scored 3 times this weekend. Hat-trick for her moves her 3 clear of Anya O'Gorman, who, of course, may be in the Ireland squad selection discussion we'll have in just a couple of moments' time. Maddie Gibson on 5, alongside Megan Smith-Lynch, Gemma Quinn and Dana Sheriff, while Karen Duggan, also on the score sheet this week, moves up to 4 points. She's only one of 2 players with 100% attendance record. Sarah Rowe has missed a minute. Anya O'Gorman and Karen Duggan, of course, misses reliability on the double there. Both of them have played every minute of the league campaign so far. In terms of the clean sheets, of course, we have Rachel Kelly and Courtney Maguire top of that particular table. 7 clean sheets for them, with Eve Badana, Amanda Budden and Niamh Burke. Plenty of experience in international caps between those 3 girls, of course, making up the next 3 spots on the table. Niamh Burke doing that with their 1 game less played than the others. Your thoughts on that? Any major surprises there for you, Aaron, in terms of the scorers or the clean sheets?
Not really. I would expect Kate to, if she keeps going the way she's going, to potentially increase that a little bit more as time goes on. Clean sheets wise, it just shows in terms of Bows, like they've had 8 wins, 7 clean sheets. Like that's massive from a side who last year would have struggled to get clean sheets. And I think a lot of it's down to Rachel Kelly and goal. I would expect to see Amanda Budden get more clean sheets in the second half of the season. I think from a Rovers viewpoint, they've leaked a couple of goals that they probably would have been a little bit disappointed with, that they probably thought they could have prevented. But no real surprises on either of them. It's mad the way you look at it, that with Karen Duggan and Anya O'Gorman playing every minute and Sarah Rowe only missing the 1. Like, as you say, reliable. The two players absolutely probably the most reliable players on. Yes, obviously had her injuries in the last couple of seasons, but back fit and really helping that Rovers team at the minute.
Now, it has to be said, that's just of the players on the top scorers list. When I do a search by minutes, we probably have about 10 girls in there who have played.
Even 10 who played every minute. That's impressive though from a 12-team league though.
Yeah, well, there's a fair few goalkeepers in there. Rachel Kelly, Badan, Amanda Budden, Anne-Marie Uliak, Dan and Treaty, O'Gorman, Duggan, Scarlett Heron, Lisa Murphy, Eva Mangan, Lauren O'Callaghan, Fiona Donnelly, and Grace McInerney and Kiva Keenan, the players with 100% records. There's a handful of girls who've missed just a handful of minutes. Jessie Mendez, Jamie Erickson, Courtney McGuire, Eve Dawson, less than a dozen minutes missed all season. So that average of 89 minutes per match, I think we'll give it to them on that basis. Let's take a quick look at the FAI Cup draw, because we had this during the week, of course. No major surprises that came up there. The 4 non-league sides in the draw, of course, always a little bit of a novelty to see who they'll get. Bonagee United were in there, Killester, Donnycarney, Turner Rangers, and Cabinteely, the 4 sides that got to the semi-finals of the FAI Amateur Cup for women earlier this season. So they were the 4 that qualified. Of course, Whitehall Rangers, who won that competition last year, knocked out this year, didn't quite make that top 4. They would have been expecting maybe to get to this grade. But the draw took place the other afternoon. I think it was on Monday or Tuesday. I can't remember quite. Tuesday, I think. Your thoughts on how they've got up there? I suppose the game of the round, possibly Athlone and Galway, but also I think Sligo Rovers and Bonagee has a little bit of local interest. There's plenty of Donegal influence in that Sligo team, and they'll know each other quite well.
Yeah, like the interesting thing from watching the draw is Ruth Comerford of Terranura Rangers was quietly confident over the fact that they got Cork City. I'm not sure how confident they'll be come close to the time, because I still think there's a bit of a gap even between the bottom side in the National League to the semi-finalists of the Amateur Cup. Like you only have to look at last year, Breifne. I think look at the average win margin. It was quite high. One of the games didn't go ahead because one of the teams didn't travel. I think, like from a likes of a Bowes point of view, getting Killester, you're very happy. Rovers getting Donnycarney.
Shamrock Rovers got Killester.
Shamrock Rovers getting Killester. Bowes getting Cabinteely.
Yeah.
They'd be slightly happy with that draw. Three all women's Premier Division ties in the round. Like I always think the interest of the cup, because I'm not sure we'll get, like, the chances of getting one upset are probably slim. Chances of getting multiple upsets, but like I did expect one of the big teams to probably draw each other. Athlone and Galway, as I say, probably is the tie of the round. Be interesting to see where Cabinteely look to play that game against Bowes. I think realistically, if you're Cabinteely, I'd probably look to be smart and try and play it in Dalymount and try and say, okay, here, let's split the gate. Play it in Dalymount, let's split the gate. Bowes tend to get a decent enough crowd through it. Interesting enough, though, Killester, Donnycarney have kids teams actually going to watch Shamrock Rovers this weekend, which is quite interesting. It was pre-arranged before the draw, so it's good to see that little familiarity. Like, and it's a day out for the non-league sides as well. Listen, the one thing we never want to see them getting beaten out the door. There's a massive gap. There's no doubt about it. Bonagee United, be interesting to see how much they've learned from this stage last year, because they're the only team who was in the cup last year, who are in it again this year. So can they make an improvement on the performance they had last year? I think they went to Cork last year. I think they did.
Yeah, they did. They were soundly beaten 6 or 7-0 in the end. I think Terranura Rangers, I watched the draw, and you're right, Ruth Comerford was very confident, almost overly confident. Even before the draw took place, she seemed to be quite confident about what was going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see if the fight and talk transpires. I think Terranura have a good track record in the cup competitions in Dublin.
I just hope that game's played on a Sunday, and because the other games are in Dublin on a Saturday, so at least then it'll actually get the bit of exposure that it deserves, or else it's played late in the evening. Because absolutely. I think Terranura will get a lot of kids out to that game, and they won't make it easy for Cork. They'll have a nice atmosphere for Cork that won't be that welcoming, but it'll be interesting to see if Cork City how they handle that sort of trip with the non-league. I know they have had some upsets in years gone by. I remember Shell's under 18s team beat them. Then again, that Shell's under 18s team beat Castlebar as well and got to the semi-final. So
well, I know you were at the draw. You were at the draw at the weekend, but also our reporter Jeremy Carney was up in Abbottstown at the draw, and he caught up with Megan Smith-Lynch. Shell's, of course, not in the draw. They get a bye to the quarterfinals. They await the 7 winners, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Here's what Megan Smith-Lynch had to say to Jeremy on Tuesday afternoon. It appears as if the audio is not working on that, so let me just send that to you again. My apologies on that. But unfortunately, sometimes we just have these technical issues here, so we'll just take a little run back. I hadn't clicked the audio button, so here we go. A second attempt at this. Let's hear from Megan Smith-Lynch.
Here with Megan Smith-Lynch of Shelburne. Megan, I know you get a bye into the first round of the draw, but looking at those 7 fixtures, anything that really stands out for you as a player?
Yeah, I think there's like a few exciting fixtures. I was sitting with the Treaty manager there, and they're home to Peamount. Treaty have come on a lot this year. Another one newcomers into our league and into this cup are Shamrock Rovers. So them at home to Leicester. I think it's a great opportunity for Leicester to play in Tallaght Stadium now. A couple of underdog teams as well. I don't see any reason why they can't put a stint in this cup this year. Ruth Comerford obviously speaking, Tallaght playing Cork City. That'll be another interesting tie as well. So yeah, a couple of nice draws. We'll just sit back in the first round and enjoy it all and wait for to find out who we play in the quarterfinal then.
I suppose for you now, it's just looking at the league. You know, you've another game against this weekend taking on Wexford, but you're third in the league at the moment. Fairly more competitive season this year, would you say? There's a lot more teams that are fighting for those places. The likes of Bows are there, Galway, obviously Shamrock Rovers are after coming into the league as well.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most exciting season, yeah, particularly for the neutrals. Maybe not us as players. I want to be winning the league, you know, and winning games every week. But I think in terms of women's football in Ireland's doing brilliant. You mentioned a couple of teams there. I think it's a 5-horse race, a 6-horse if you really want to look into it this year. It's exciting. It's really exciting times, and like every game is a massive one every weekend. I think we mentioned every week this is a massive one this weekend. There's no such thing as playing the top teams anymore. But looking ahead to this weekend, obviously there's a bit of history between us and Wexford Youth. So, you know, it would be nice to go into the mid-season break getting 3 points against them.
I suppose you mentioned the growth and the competitiveness of the league. We've seen record-breaking attendances. Obviously, the last day between Bows and Shamrock Rovers and Dalymount, we had the cup final last year, which set a record attendance for a women's cup final. As a player going through the league, is it great to see that the women's game in this country is growing and more fans are coming to the games and the coverage is there. Obviously, Sports Director after coming on now as title sponsor for the Women's Cup, so it's only going to be growing over the next few years as well.
Absolutely. To get a sponsor like Sports Direct is absolutely brilliant to back this competition. You know, and you mentioned the attendances, the cup final attendance last year was brilliant, and you could really feel it, you know. We heard that lone supporters, they were fantastic on the day. I think there was busloads of them. We didn't like as Shell's players, but they were brilliant. The supporters, shame the Shelburne fans every week in Talga Park. You know, and you see the young kids coming up from Shelburne academies supporting every week and supporting all teams around the league. You mentioned Bows setting a record attendance last weekend. You know, and we want to keep setting records every week. You know, we don't want to just stop at the Bows game last weekend, but the coverage has been absolutely brilliant. Obviously, TG Carr coming on board as well and showcasing the games, and obviously the World Cup. I think that's just the league's going to explode even more after the World Cup, you know, with how well we believe the girls could do over there.
How have you found the season in terms of maybe being a little bit stop-start where, you know, we had 10 teams last year, Shamrock Rovers right now, and there's 11. Obviously, there's bye weeks for a few teams, and, you know, obviously this is the final. We're coming into the final game week now before, obviously, submitting the World Cup. We're going to have the international break for a while, but then we're also going to have the All-Ireland Cup, which now sees you taking on teams from the north as well. So the growth is even more there when now you have the chance to take on teams that aren't from, you know, the Women's League of Ireland as well. Yeah,
this All-Ireland Cup is a completely new test. I think it's a great idea. You know, what it'll do is it'll give all teams an opportunity to play players because it's that little break from the league. And it just gets us ready for the World Cup as well. You know, a couple of games. I think we have Galway, Athlone and Linfield. Obviously Linfield, a new team for ourselves. There's a group of death as well. It'll be really interesting with a couple of big teams. Glentoran are very strong up there, so they're in a group with Rovers, PM and Wexford. That's an interesting group, but it's exciting competition. It's a new one, and we want to be the first names on that trophy, on that competition. So hopefully we can do well in it.
Could be trying for a domestic treble this year of the 2 cups on offer and the league title as well.
Absolutely.
Looking at yourself as well, you know, you're balancing life playing for Shelburne, but you're also coaching as well. I suppose, how did you fall into the coaching at such a relatively young age as well to be coaching? I suppose I know you're coaching an Ireland underage team as well.
Yeah, I was lucky enough. Tom Elms got the head coach job for the under-16 women's team, and 2 years ago now. And he asked me to come in as his assistant 2 years ago, and then ever since then, I've loved the role. And obviously with the women qualifying for the World Cup, Tom has now gone full time in with the seniors just in preparations for the World Cup. So I was lucky enough to step up into the position, and I'm, you know, honoured and privileged to be able to balance both at the moment, and it's gone really well. And it helps me as a player, and then playing helps me in my coaching as well. So they're really working hand in hand with each other.
Megan Smith-Lynch there, joining us, ended a bit abruptly there, but Megan Smith-Lynch, giving her thoughts on the draw, even though it doesn't necessarily affect them just yet, it does separate them from the wheat from the chaff. So interesting to see how it goes up for them as well. She talked about the Avenir Cup. Before we leave the FAI Cup draw, we might just mention that cup final tickets are available now, and it's something no more than the Ladies Gaelic, again, 15, 20 years ago. It's an event that teams should be bringing their underage players to, regardless of who's in it. Like, buy the tickets now, make the plans, bring your underage girls teams from whatever county or region in the country you're based in, and make it a day out, make it something that they can see it, they can be it in the future. And I think that's super vital, because we hear these girls, these young players in the league now talking about their first touch of a cup final or an Ireland game, and it's what's kept them coming back and back and back playing over the years.
Breifne, last year's cup final was one of the best atmospheres I've ever been at for the women. It was unbelievable. You had the Shells fans on the right hand side, the Athlone fans down the left hand side. And the Athlone fans had drums and all. They were absolutely never stopped for the entire game. And you just, like, it's great when you see the kids coming around, the teams coming around, all the different club colours and stuff like that. And the thing is, like, if you contact I assume the FAI do what they normally do. Like, they normally have packages available for teams to bring, schools to bring teams. You'll also have the new stand open in Tallaght as well by then. Just won't be ready for the two warm up games. But like, that's another opportunity to add another 2,000. Like, how great would it be to get close to a full house for a cup final in Tallaght? It'd be unbelievable. Like, the thing is, before we can even start demanding to go back to the Aviva, we have to start getting full houses in Tallaght and getting them regularly in Tallaght for the cup final, and then we can start looking at, is it time to go back to the Aviva? But like Megan said, as she said, there is a potential that the league could explode over the World Cup. But then again, like, you'd have thought we'd have got a bit of a buzz off the back of England winning last year because it was close to home as well. The Euros was on close to home. Like, I'm interested to see what actually comes off the back of it. I think the FAI are doing great things with the legacy, with a lot of the legacy stuff that they're trying to implement in and around the World Cup. And like, it's booming at the minute. Things are booming at the minute. And how much of an increase we get off the World Cup, nobody can really answer that question at the minute. That's the thing. Nobody can answer that question. But the one thing we can say is there's more and more people now starting to say, "Oh, I'll bring my son or I'll bring my daughter to go watch the women's team play." That maybe we wouldn't have had that a couple of years ago. And I think, as you say, you can't see. You know, the conversations are completely different to where they were 3-4 years ago, even.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward then, the Avenir Cup, of course, is on the horizon now. Last round of games this weekend. We won't deal with the fixtures in just a couple of months, as well as a quick look at maybe some of the squad announcements or surprises we might see tomorrow with a League of Ireland interest, I suppose, from a point of view of the players within our own league. But first and foremost, Avenir Cup, there's been a change this week. Derry City have invited Sion Swifts, their neighbours, to take their place in that competition. Can't say I'm overly surprised. I'm guessing Derry were included because they're also in the League of Ireland for the men's, and they're an obvious inclusion. But I think if you look at the league table, it's quite clear that they wouldn't bring a whole pile in terms of competitive edge. Is that fair to say? Without being too harsh.
I think it was probably a wise move from Derry. I think it was a wise move from Derry. It'll obviously affect Sligo and Bohs for the fact that Bohs will probably have to go. Well, Bohs will have to go to Sion.
It's closer. It's closer. Strabag's easier to get to than Derry.
But like, for me, like, I had concerns over how the scorelines were going to go, looking at Derry scores in the first couple of games in the league up north. So like, Sion have tended to have a good reputation. They've obviously brought through the likes of Tallaght Stadium in recent years. Roman McLaughlin's had spells with them. Kira Grant has had spells with them before coming back to Shells. And like, you'll be hoping they will add a good bit to the competition. As Megan did say, though, the group of death is looking very, very, very interesting with Peamount Wexford, Glentoran and Shamrock Rovers. Yes. Like, I can't imagine the Peamount Shamrock Rovers game. I suspect there'll be a couple of changes to that side and to the side that plays this weekend. And like, you just hope that for the first competition, the games do it justice, because there's always that fear that because it's a mid-season, players may book holidays, players may be away because of the way things are working out. So you just hope that, you know, teams give it the best possible foot forward. Yes, they'll make some changes, and hopefully it is competitive and it's not just a one-sided competition.
I do think it's unfortunate that they've cut out the quarterfinal stage of a 16-team competition. I think only the group winners going through may make some round 3 fixtures immaterial, and even some round 2 fixtures. If 2 teams get a pace on the first round, pace each other round 2 and whatever round 3, I just think there could be a lot of. There might even potentially at this level, I hate saying it, be a couple of no-shows in round 3 of the competition when it doesn't mean anything, and I think that would be a negative. I think maybe we look at other competition formats in the country that we're looking at, the Sam Maguire Cup and the Tallaght Cup in men's football. I know it's a different code, but the team going into the last 8 and then the next 2 teams going in meant that every single game was competitive right up until the last set of games last week. I think that's a little bit overkill, but I definitely think the top 2 going through to a seeded quarterfinal. It adds 1 round of fixtures. That's all it is. It's 1 week.
I assume it's all due to timing. I assume it's all
100%. Yeah, it absolutely
but
is.
Like for me though, Breifne, like you could have easily, like, if you'd had, how would you say? That's why I would like to see all 21 teams in it, and then just nearly have it in 7 groups of 3. Have the 7 winners come out. The 7 winners come out. The best runner up on them, and nearly put it into a last 16, put it into a quarter final then, and run it off at least then. But like, that shows your fear that it's going to go to a semi-final. It's just going to go straight to a semi-final or final, and like it'll be over pretty quickly. And be interested to see where the semi-finals and finals sort of take place.
Who do you think's going to win it?
I don't know. I think Bows of a decent draw. I'm interested to see what comes out. Who comes out of the 3D group?
Yeah.
The problem is I could say this team is going to win it or this team is going to win it. The problem is P amount of Rovers could put out players from their under 17s and 19s to give them an opportunity, and all of a sudden get beaten and be out of the group. And like, I do think a team from the south will win it.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure which one yet. I'd be fairly confident in making a prediction once we get to the semi-final stage, but we don't know what teams people are going to put out at this stage.
Do you want a ladder to get back down off that fence? You good? I had a question for you earlier. You mentioned I was going to put you on the spot. So there has been rumours this week about Love Island having a League of Ireland input this week. The rumour mill is suggesting, I did see a couple of shouts for Jordan Adeyemo, who left Wexford earlier in the season. I can't see that happening. Scott Vandersloot seems to be the favourite for most people to be the one who's going to be part of the show. But if it was a woman, who do you think it would be, and would Bohemians miss her?
It's definitely not going to. It's definitely not going to be. I know who you're talking about straight away. I'm not even answering that question, because that's the sort of question that would.
You could take your pick. I'm not talking about anyone in particular. It could be half the Bohemians team, as far as I'm concerned. But no. But like, who do you think would make a great Love Island contestant from the Women's National League?
I've never watched an episode, so I couldn't even tell you who. And I'm not going to even throw myself over it. I'll sit on the fence on that.
Need a ladder for the other side of the fence this time. Moving quickly on, Women Irish squad comes out next week or tomorrow morning. Who can we expect to see in it from a League of Ireland point of view? Who should we see in it? And is it kind of if you're not in tomorrow, you're not going to the World Cup? Is that game over?
Unless there's a major injury that pulls you in, I don't suspect anybody. If you're not, the only ones who I say will probably not be named, I'm not 100% sure if the likes of Denise O'Sullivan will be named tomorrow, just because the fact that I don't know when the American players are going to be released from their clubs, so I'm not sure if they'll be announced, but they will come in. They will come in. The likes of Denise, Marissa Sheevers, and Sinead Farrelly. I would say if you're not in the 27 from a home base side of things, you probably 27. I suspect she'll name about 27, 28. You don't have a chance. The talk is
who's likely to be in there from a League of Ireland point of view.
The talk is there's only going to be 4: Erin McLaughlin, Tara O'Hanlon, Anya O'Gorman, and Abby Larkin. So the talk is no Jessie Stapleton. For me, I'd have Jessie in all day. And like the thing is, I get why they don't want to bring in a massive squad either. they're going to do a lot of the preparations over a bit of it over the other side of the city, not in Abbottstown, and she wants to have a smaller squad. I suspect that if you're not in tomorrow, I don't think we'll see any surprises from the National League. I would have loved to see a Swift Doyle get a bit of an opportunity to go and impress, because Swift Doyle is probably 7.5. It's probably been harsh. Probably about 8.5 every out of 10 every game, and she's so consistent. But like Erin McLaughlin getting a bit of an opportunity, she sort of was a little bit on the periphery. She was in for one of the camps in Spain earlier in the year. Like, I don't know. That was the rumor last week, and there's been no real changes so far. But I don't think she'll pull much of a rabbit out of the hat tomorrow. And I think a lot of the players that will be named will be players that we will have seen already in the camp. I don't think any more will come in that we haven't seen previously.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say we'll move on because we're getting close to the hour mark here, and I do want a quick look at the fixtures this weekend. And of course, the big one probably has to be that game in Tallaght, Shamrock Rovers versus Peamount United. I'm going to be in Sligo. Of course, Galway United, the Connacht Derby there as well. Wexford coming to Tallaght Park. Plenty of big games this weekend. The LOIWomen, of course, host Treaty. There's a competitive game between two sides, just one place separating them in the league table. Where are you going to be? What's your plans for the weekend?
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't. I'm tying with a couple. I haven't really nailed it down yet. I'd say probably just because of timings, I may find myself on one of the games on the north side of Dublin, probably either at Shells, Wexford, or Bows Cork. But the interesting thing, just on the Shells Wexford point of view, Wexford went into that previous game against Shells on the back of a bit of a barren run, and look what they've done. They have a tendency of getting big results against Shelbourne. Jess Lawler in Tallaght Park last year, when she charged down Amanda Budd to give them the 1-0 victory. Tallaght Park seems to be a good hunting home for Wexford youths in recent years. Shells will be really looking to turn that around. But I think there's a lot of compelling games. I think, as you say, the DLR Treaty game, for the fact that they're so close. Alvin Heisler probably feels they should have got something out of the game. They should have got the 3 points out of the game when they met earlier in the season in the 0-0 draw. Like, the only criminal offence that I'm going to claim this weekend is the fact that there's 4 games in Dublin this weekend is absolutely criminal. But there's
not a lot of people. There's not a lot of people. Let's be honest, who will go to more than one game of a weekend, even if they were spread out across the weekend.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, maybe.
You'd be surprised, and you'd be actually genuinely surprised in Dublin. You'd see the amount of faces you'd see that rock up to Peamount, or rock up to somewhere at 2 o'clock, and then rock up to Peamount at 5 o'clock, or rock up to Rovers at 5:30. You'd be surprised more than you think.
No, fair enough. What's your thoughts on that game when you mention it now? Rovers and Peamount on Saturday, and it could potentially be a title decider. If Peamount win that game, it's going to be very hard to see them get pulled back in. The only way they're going to lose the league is if they capitulate rather than the other way around. So, can Rovers beat them? Do they need to beat them?
Yeah, I think they need to beat them. I don't think a draw is good enough for Rovers, just for the fact that Peamount would have got rid of Shells. They'd have got rid of Shells and Rovers already with 7 games to go and having a 3-point lead. I think this Peamount side is different to last year. Like, you look at the midway section of last year, that's probably where they lost the league, and they were playing catch up, and they sort of couldn't. They just ran out of games. Whereas I think this year, if Peamount win this game and got 6 points clear, I don't see anybody catching Peamount, and then people probably have to start talking about Peamount as the title favourites. People still really aren't really talking as much about them. We're all talking. A lot of people talking about can Rovers keep the unbeaten record. Like, a draw does Peamount, but then again, a draw also sort of, if Shells get a win, brings Shells back into it as well, and Shells still have to play Rovers. Still have to play Rovers as well. But I'd say from a Rovers point of view, they definitely need a win. But if the Rovers side that turned up to PRL Park show up on Saturday, Peamount will beat them. I can't see Peamount making the mistakes they made in PRL Park not to take all 3 points. And that was probably the one game that's, if you ask James O'Callaghan, that and the Shells game are the 2 games that probably haunt them a little bit this year, because they really should have beaten Shamrock Rovers. The late penalty save by Amanda Budd, brilliant save, but she also made another 2 or 3 superb saves late on that she really carried her team that day. And it's interesting when you look at Rovers a little bit. There's players like Jamie Thompson was on the bench last week, players who sort of starting games now, not necessarily. Abby Larkin being taken off quite early last week. They're not hitting their full pelt, but then again, there's going to be no motivation needed for either side at the weekend for the fact that the 6 or 7 ex-P-Mount players in the dressing room and P-Mount going there we haven't lost the players, so there's no motivation needed for either side, I don't think.
I do think it's a big game for both teams because I think if Shamrock Rovers go on and win the game and put themselves in pole position to win the league, albeit with a bit of a decent run in left, 7 games to play after this weekend, I think it will be a real statement from their arrival in the league. But on the other side, I think if P-Mount can hold on and avoid defeat in that game or even maybe win it and go on to win the league title, I think it'll actually be probably the most impressive result of a season for a club in the league in a long time, because given where they've been, they haven't really, they were beaten on the last day of the season 2 years ago, fell out of contention 2 days from the end of the season last year, looked to be dropping a little bit, got decimated in the off season, at least publicly on the outside, and they've responded like this. I think personally it'd be the best league win in a couple seasons.
Interesting stuff, you know. They've dropped points in 2 games. A draw against Shamrock Rovers and a loss against Shells. It's the only games they've dropped points this season. Whereas Shamrock Rovers have drawn, obviously they haven't lost a game, but they've drawn 4. Shells have drawn 1 and lost 3. Whereas the difference is, I think this season is just P-Mount's consistency. Like you look at the biggest test for them was probably off the back of that Shells defeat. How did they react off the back of that Shells defeat? Happened on a midweek, the 2.5 weeks between games, and you're sort of thinking, how are they going to go out and react here? And then all of a sudden, they go and play Wexford and get 3 points against Wexford, and that just showed the character for me. And if they can get them, I think we really have to start talking about is a P-Mount's league, and like Saturday will tell us an awful lot. And the fact that it's the last round of the league game. It's the last round of the league games until mid August as well. So there's a long time to sit on this result.
Yeah, it's a big weekend for a lot of teams this weekend. But it is also the end of the show for this week. We will be back probably with a show next week. We haven't quite decided yet what we're doing, but there's a mid-season break, so maybe we might take a week off as well. But the Avenir Cup will be the next thing after this week. Of course, there is the small matter of a little competition taking place on the other side of the planet called the World Cup. Ireland are going to be there for the first time in our history in the women's sense, and it's a phenomenal achievement and really exciting times. Aaron's going to be there. I'll be here. We're going to try and work something in terms of the time difference. It's not going to be kind. One of us is going to be up late. One of us is going to be up early. We haven't quite had the coin toss or the. We might just do rock paper scissors to see who has the early morning.
No, I think it might be best if I have the early morning.
Yeah, early mornings and me don't go well together. Aaron, again, as always, it's been a pleasure. You be in Dublin at 1 of 4 games, maybe even 2 of 4 games over the weekend. I'll be in Sligo, but it promises to be a good last round of games in this section of the league. Plenty to play for on Saturday evening. From all of us here on finalwhistle.ie and at the Women's National League podcast, we'll be back with you again next week. Talk to you then.